Today, we'll discuss the process of creating a digital archive of music and testimonies for experiences in centers for political detention in Chile under the dictatorship of General Augusto Pinochet, one of the darkest periods in Latin American history. Our project, called Cantos Cautivos, or Captive Songs, uses crowdsourcing, personal interviews, and public events to collect primary materials. Music acts as an emotional bridge to help survivors access memories and express difficult feelings. Music is also a means to sensitize audiences to human rights violations. We will discuss the decisions we have taken to connect different types of archival materials using a category-based relational data model and various internet technologies. We shall show that this blended approach has been effective in achieving the main purpose of the project, which is to contribute to the collective memory of the dictatorship and to the moral reparation and public recognition of victims, survivors, and their families.
On 11 September 1973, Chile's armed forces, with the support of the US government and the CIA, staged a coup d'etat against the government of President Salvador Allende, the first democratically elected socialist leader in Latin America. Allende retreated with his supporters to La Moneda, the fortress-like presidential palace in Santiago, which was surrounded by tanks and infantry and bombed by Air Force jets. Allende killed himself after the aerial attack as troops stormed the burning palace. The democratic government was succeeded by the brutal dictatorship of General Augusto Pinochet, who ruled with iron fist for the next 17 years, leaving more than 3,000 political opponents assassinated or disappeared, and more than 4,000 direct victims of human rights violations, as per the findings of the government-sponsored National Trust Commission of Political Imprisonment and Torture, known as the Valech Commission. There were 1,168 centers used for political detention and torture during the dictatorship, including prison camps, clandestine centers, civilian public buildings and stadiums, and military, police, and penal units. We have collected testimonies relating to 36 centers. The day of the coup was a Tuesday. My mother went to work at the library of the Technical University of Santiago by bus. My father had died 3 years earlier, and I lived with my younger sister in a small town about 20 miles south of Santiago. On that day, we didn't go to school because the eternal strikes happening at that time in Chile. I was 15 years old. In the morning, we heard the news of the military coup, or military pronouncement, as the government called it. You could risk being arrested if you used the word coup. TV channels stopped broadcasting, and only a few radio stations were still following the events and encouraging listeners to resist. Soon after, all radio broadcasts were replaced with the official announcement of a total curfew. We turned on an Argentinian radio station and learned about the bombing of Chile's government palace and the death of President Allende. In the evening, my mother got home. There was fierce resistance at the university, and many of my mother's friends and colleagues had been detained. Somehow, the military let her go, and she walked all the way back home. Many people from the university were detained and died that day. Among them, a very famous musician, Victor Jara, who was tortured to death in a stadium nearby, which was used as a concentration camp. Today, that place is called Estadio Victor Jara. At home, one of the first things my mother did was to burn books, magazines, and records, anything that resembled some left-wing thinking, music from progressive progressive musicians from the new song movement like Inti Gimani, Ijapu, and Violeta Parra. She even destroyed books of Cubism because the military thought that Cubism was related to Cuba. That day in Chile, the music died. But unlike the song American Pie by Tom McLean, this death was brutally literal and replaced with military marches, old-style ballads, and folkloric songs describing the beauty of the country or regretting some jilted love. The curfew lasted days, months, and then years until 1982. The media broadcast censored news telling how good life was now, how our military heroes saved us from the communist slavery, and how free and protected we were under the military. Once, my mother told me she felt sorry not for her, but for us, our generation. Democracy was a distant dream, and that will take thousands of deaths and so much pain and suffering to recover. The first time I took part in a democratic election in Chile, I was 38 years old.
I was born and spent my childhood outside Chile. I had scant knowledge of the political violence under Pinochet, as my parents, political exiles, told me little. It was only a teenager in the 1990s, after we returned to Chile, that I began to comprehend the magnitude of what had happened. Accompanied my parents to, last slide. Accompanying my parents to a memorial service held outside a house in Southeast Santiago had a profound impact on me. An otherwise unremarkable house, it was used by the DINA Secret Service to detain, torture, and exterminate political opponents. The extensive use of sexual violence against detainees, always blindfolded, prompted its gruesome name of Venda Sexy, or Sexy Blindfold. The house was also called La Discotheque due to agents blasting loud music at all times. My parents had been imprisoned there, and this was the first time they had returned. I was studying the violin and learning that music was so prominent at Venda Sexy as a component of torture shocked me. Later, this was to spark my lost-lasting interest in collecting music pieces and memories of musical experiences in political detention centers. I've been working on the topic for over a decade, on and off, first as a master's dissertation at the Royal Academy of Music, comparing music performances in Nazi camps and in Chilean camps under Pinochet. After my PhD on music in Alejo Carpentier's novels, I had a Liber Humorly Career Fellowship at the University of Manchester and worked intensively on the topic of music in detention, focusing on Chile under Pinochet. Two subsequent projects funded by the Chilean Culture Council and the Ministry for Culture have allowed us to further the research. Through collecting testimonies from around 70 survivors and 2 perpetrators, I have found evidence of music activities in all levels of political imprisonment, from secret torture chambers to concentration camps, prisons, and even convents. This photo here is a convent in the north of Chile called Buen Pastor, where the nuns had an agreement with the military to hold political prisoners. The prevalence of music and sound employed as a form of torture under Pinochet's dictatorship appeared to be more widespread than I originally expected, resembling practices of US and UK intelligence agencies. Despite acknowledging resulting damage, my interviewee's difficulty to classify this as human rights violations has been directly influenced by the narrow definitions used by truth commissions and NGOs collecting testimonies, and by the fact that torture was legally not a crime in Chile until 2016, as it was not part of the penal code. Researching perpetrators' musical engagement is controversial, as it may challenge the notion that the worldviews of survivors and those of perpetrators have nothing in common whatsoever. I have found that while the expected pattern of opposition between their musical taste and that of victims is generally confirmed, perpetrators' relationships with music are more complex, in some way mirroring those of their victims. Several survivors who have contributed to my research have stated that they had never shared their experiences of political and torture before. I would argue that remembering through music, possibly the most subjective and emotional cultural form, effectively enables survivors to establish relationships with difficult experiences, providing them with an accessible tool to address these. Music acts as a catalyst for facilitating, engaging with, and contributing to memory processes, opening up previously closed spaces. Thus, music is one of the possible answers to the question posed by Michael Lazara in his 2006 book, Chile in Transition, and I quote, "When a nation has suffered a traumatic and scarring episode, in what languages is it possible to convey the experience?" Although music was commonly present in political detention centers, until recently, survivors would often self-censor memories of their musical experiences, as only testimonies shedding light on judicial investigations were valued. Memories of positive and empowering experiences, such as music festivals organized by prisoners in concentration camps, as well as musical pieces composed in detention that convey happiness and fun, are examples of what the cultural critic and former political prisoner Jorge Montealegre terms paradoxical happiness in his 2018 book, Derecho a Fuga. Remembering these stories has been considered inadequate and inconsequent with the tragic discourse around the dictatorship. However, much water has flowed under the bridge in recent years. Cultural objects and associated memories have slowly gained the appreciation of different sectors, yet a tendency to use music to relativize violations to human rights persists. People wonder if the treatment received by prisoners was really so bad, given they were able to make music and even enjoy themselves through music.
Okay. First of all, I need to clarify that my work for Cantos Cautivos is not related to my work at the IBM research labs, and that IBM has not participated in any way in the development of this project. In this part, we will experience the Cantos Cautivos website. And for that, I will ask you to do something you usually are requested not to do when attending a presentation. I invite you to take your mobile phone or open your browser window on your computer and enter the URL cantoscautivos.org or your web browser, or scan the QR code on the screen. I will do the same in my computer. Okay, I just wait. People can enter. Okay. All pages in our site have a similar structure. A page with content, a menu that appears by clicking on the three horizontal bars at the top. Yeah. Icons to change the language of the page from English to Spanish. I will do it here. Yeah, now this in the Spanish, now in English. A search box and icons to connect to our social network accounts. Please enter the word lucky here in the search box and click on the magnifying glass icon. This action will look for testimonies containing the word lucky. In this case, there are 9 testimonies where this word appears. Yeah. The results of the search show the name of the musical piece that we use to identify a testimony. We also show the author of the piece, who told the testimony, in which detention center did it happen, and a brief excerpt of the testimony and the location of the search word. We also include tags that link to similar testimonies. Please click on the name of the testimony, Lucky Devil, or read full testimony.
Folclor de Chacabuco.
In our archive, the testimony is always associated with a music piece. That's the reason we show the testimony along with the music piece. Even more, if you're using a computer, the music piece, like here, will start playing immediately. If you have a mobile phone, you will need to click on the play image to hear it. This testimony describes a cueca, a festive music genre from Chile, Peru, and Bolivia, sung by the group Los de Chacabuco, formed by political prisoners in the detention center Chacabuco, located in the Atacama Desert in the north of Chile. The recording you can hear was clandestinely made, and the lyrics have several subtle references to the life of the prisoners and their captors. If you hover the mouse, or click on the underlined words, you will get a brief description of this term. Also, if I put here cueca, I can see the difference. Also, you can switch the language here, so you can see how are the original lyrics of this musical piece are in Spanish. Let's switch back to English. At the end of the testimony, there is a name of a victim remembered here. In this case, is Marcelo Concha. If you click on this name, you will be directed to the page of the Chile's Museum of Memory. Okay, that's all in Spanish, telling that Marcelo Concha disappeared in 1977 after being arrested by agents of the Chilean state. The words in red here indicate links to information related to this testimony. Please click on Campamento de Prisioneros Chacabuco here, the name of the detention center at the header of this testimony. This page will lead you to more information about the detention center, a map with its location in Chile, a link to a page of the Chilean Museum of Memory with more information about the detention center, and also other testimony that we have collected that recount music experiences happening in the same place. In this case, there are 28 testimonies related to this detention center. The internet's capability to link information, to dynamically create narratives starting from something as simple as the word lucky, is one of the characteristics we wanted to implement in the project. Many archival sites show their data as a list of links, including the title and author of the testimony or data, a method that is suitable when working with a big number of data, but we think reduces the appeal to read the testimony and also make it difficult to understand the context of the search results. That's a reason for showing excerpts of the testimony and to add links and tags where you can browse related testimony and information and connect them with music. Please select detention centers on the menu here. A list of the detention centers with testimony is shown along with a map of Chile and the location of each one of these centers. You can either click on the name of your center or in the map here. Please go south, really south, here, to the very last region, and you can click on the Campamento de Prisioneros Isla Doso. You will get testimonies from a detention center in Patagonia, where many of the ministers of Allende's government and members of the Chilean parliament were imprisoned. We also provide the option to share memories. Through this page, we invite people to share the memories. This crowdsourcing mechanism has proved to be quite useful, and currently about half of the testimonies have been obtained in this way. I invite you to play around through the site. Click on the language switch to get the lyrics of a song in English or Spanish. Search testimony, listen to the songs. The platform has 154 testimonies, of which 52 refer to songs fully or partially created in detention. The system is built upon a database using a dictionary that links to different categories of information. Each dictionary element or token is part of the more complex elements that are categorized at different levels. The word is part of a testimony or a song. A testimony is related to a detention center or a victim. A victim is related to other testimonies or centers and so on. This flexible structure allows the system to easily connect the information in the system in multiple and complex ways, including mixing different languages, and could also allow us in the future to obtain aggregated information that could be used for academic research. For example, statistics on music styles and origins, gender, and several other categories or tags that can be easily added and later correlated. The site here, the site also uses Google Maps, geographically locating the detention centers, a capability that could have a significant impact on younger audiences, especially Chilean, as a means to know their country and recent history. For media, YouTube is used, but the system is open to use other media platforms like Vivo. All the software in this project was developed by me in collaboration with Chornik, based on an initial version developed in WordPress by a team of the Museum of Memory and Human Rights in Chile in 2015. From the analysis of this version, and also from the feedback we received, we took the following decisions. We redesigned the web interface, focused on its ease of use, coherency, and dynamicity. We added full bilingual support of the site with easy switching between each language version, keeping the context of the site. We changed the block-oriented structure of WordPress to a relational data model, organized in categories similar to Omeka.net. Omeka.net, but adapted to our requirements and a smaller archive size. Omeka.net is a content management system for online digital collections. I used it when collaborated with the Historical Memory Project led by Professor Marcia Esparza at City University of New York that uses unqualified Dublin Core metadata standard, which define basic set of core properties for describing resource that can be extended into metadata items. Also powerful, we found that the Omeka templates were difficult to adapt to our requirements, especially at the user interface level and management of a small size archives. We use an inverted index to relate the text appearing in the project to context, where the context could be the name of a victim, a testimony, a song, the name of a detention center, the author of a musical piece, or any text handled by the system. Also, the concept of context was enhanced with weight based on the accuracy of the search or assigned it directly. For example, we wanted the testimonies to be shown before detention centers. We use GitHub as a system repository, which allows us to share and make changes to the system, even though Katia and me live in different countries. GitHub is a corporation providing hosting for software development and version control using Git. Git is a distribution version control system created by Linus Torvald in 2005. If you select victims from the menu, you will enter a page with the name and photographs of those who were killed or disappeared. The total number of victims is several thousands. Those pictures on our website are the ones mentioned in the testimonies. For me, this is the most emotive page on the site. Relatives of the disappeared have found new clues about where and when the missing ones were through descriptions of musical performance found in the Cantos Cautivos archive.
The reasons for developing the Cantos Cautivos project were manifold. First, there was substantial music activity under political captivity. Second, the number of detention centers was huge, over 1,000, as was the number of people who had contact with music, tens of thousands. Third, many survivors are scattered around the world, and doing in-depth interviews only possible with a limited number of people. Fourth, and most importantly, there is an urgent need to collect and preserve testimonial materials, as the number of survivors is diminishing very fast. Many have died, and approximately 80% are currently older than 70. In a 2020 article on the process of listening to war and violence in archives, musicologist Annegret Forser notes that, quote, as archives as constructed entities, they privilege certain experiences over others. Whose voice and which musics are recorded in the archives reflects the value system, not only of past societies, but also of current ones, given the way access to collection is curated, end of quote. In constructing the Cantos Cautivos archive, we have collected and curated testimonies referring to any type of music. Testimonies in our archive discuss a wide range of folk, popular and classical music genres from South, Central and North America, as well as Europe, from Renaissance madrigals to 1980s pop. However, we have taken a deliberate decision not to include certain voices, and here I'm referring to testimonies of perpetrators of human rights violations. Although I posit that giving voice to those who devised, participated, or facilitated violations does not imply the justification, relativization, or validation of these events, engaging with perpetrators is contentious, particularly among communities directly affected by state terror. As Claudia Feld and Valentina Salvi note in the 2019 study of perpetrators in Argentina during the last dictatorship, giving voice to them has generally not been accepted by society unless it has directly helped the identification, denunciation, or prosecution of culprits. Yet perpetrators have rarely collaborated in the search for the truth, often justifying and denying the crimes committed, disqualifying and even denigrating victims and their families. Although my approach to perpetrators has not centered around the clarification of human rights violations, but on the memories of musical phenomena generated by them and by prisoners, Cantos Cautivos is a public, well-visited platform whose audience includes people directly affected by Pinochet's dictatorship and repressive regimes in other countries. The platform is also used by human rights organizations, researchers, school and university teachers and students, journalists, governmental bodies, and the general public. The primary aim of the project is to contribute to the moral reparation and public recognition of victims, survivors, and their families, and from that positionality to add to the collective memory of the dictatorship. Our project sits in the area of symbolic reparation, of reparative justice, as it takes the form of revealing the truth about violations themselves and commemorate, via music, the lives of those who challenge the repression. As Karin Landau and Janet Topfargen highlight in a 2012 article, archival materials produced as part of ethnographic projects have the capacity to generate a more equitable and enduring outcome for the benefit of communities as well as of scholarship. In our case, survivors have been involved in various aspects of the project beyond the production of primary data, from co-writing explanatory texts and co-planning website design and content, to helping negotiating partnerships with human rights organizations and speaking about Cantos Cautivos in public talks and media interviews. Involving survivors in matters beyond the production of primary materials has increased engagement and mutual accountability. In particular, the participation in the production of explanatory texts has ensured that the ways in which their stories are presented ties in with their needs and wishes. They also have the power to amend and withdraw the testimonies whenever they want.
One of the most valued aspects of the project is its wide media dissemination through over 40 media outlets, including the BBC, CBC, The Guardian, El País, and National Spanish TV. In 2018 and 19, our project was included in the in the British Museum I Object exhibition curated by Jan Hislop and Tom Hackenhall, which featured objects addressing acts of created disobedience spanning a period of 3 millennia, from Babylonian tablets to Brexit memorabilia. Although the Cantos Cautivos project is focused on preserving music memories of political detention centers during the 1970s and 80s dictatorship, it is also relevant in the current context of human rights violations in Chile. In October 2019, millions of Chileans turned to the streets to protest social inequality and demand better and equal access to education and healthcare, fair salaries and pensions, and a new constitution, among other things. These demands are rooted in a long-standing dissatisfaction with the neoliberal transformation of the economy and the state, which began under the Pinochet dictatorship and continued under civilian-led governments. In response to protests, the government of President Sebastián Piñera has made wide use of lethal force, torture, and ill treatments. Reports of the UN, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights have all concluded that Chilean state during the last 12 months has committed crimes under international law and grave human rights violations, the worst since Pinochet's regime. Against this background, a song written by the singer-songwriter Víctor Jara has had a very prominent role in the ongoing protests that began a year ago. The song is called El Derecho de Vivir en Paz, the right to live in peace, and was originally written in response to the Vietnam War. As I mentioned earlier, Víctor Jara was a famous musician and was imprisoned and killed by the Pinochet regime.
El derecho de vivir, poeta Ho Chi Minh, que golpea de Vietnam a toda la humanidad. Ningún cañón borrará el surco de tu arrozal, el derecho de vivir en paz.
In October 2019, Jara's The Right to Live in Peace became viral when a group of musicians from the city of Valparaíso plotted an online protest against President Sebastián Piñera's use of martial law and public declaration that the country was at war. The call was to play Jara's song at full volume on instruments, CD players, mobiles, smart TVs, and turntables at the exact time when the curfew began. The right to live in peace has had an equally important presence on the street protests, from solo singers and instrumentals and choirs and orchestras throughout Chile and the diaspora worldwide in the last 12 months. Why does music have such power? In the forthcoming volume, Music and Human Rights, Julian Pfeiffer et al. Offer an explanation. Music dignifies human experience and acts as a critical conduit for feelings, experiences, and aspirations. Additionally, music's exceptional ability to invoke joy, sadness, and hope, and to inspire protest and resistance allows people to recognize their own and others' humanity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.